Hi folks, we're looking into Module 5 novice problems, and I'm going to take most of these problems individually because they're a little heavier in terms of content. So here's problem number 1. Problem number 1 is a problem that asks us to create a group of 35 randomly selected records from a database. And the database consists of 425 transactions. You can see them down here. These are transactions and records, data records for credit risk analysis. You can see that these are individuals that have applied for a loan. Here's the purpose. Here's the amount of their checking balance, their savings balance, the months they've been a customer, the months they've been employed, their gender, whether they're single or not, their age, status for owning or renting housing, years for that, and then finally job and credit ratings. I'm going to remove this last column because it's a column that I will show you how to add later when we're doing this analysis without our software, but simply with Excel. So there's our data. The first thing we want to look at in this problem is that we've gone to the Excel Miner platform. There are other tabs here, but I want to go to the Excel Miner. And here's our menu system. The menu system does not appear exactly the way it does in the book. This is an updated version of it. Get data has been added. In the data analysis, there's still 4 elements, but text is not there in the textbook. This is text analysis, which is a very powerful technique because often data comes in terms of text or categorical data. The thing that is missing there is that there is something called sample that's not here. Sample is really this get data. It's just been taken out because it's such an important function by itself. So you'll have sample, explore, transform, cluster. You won't have text in the textbook, but this is not difficult to understand. So here's our data, and quite often we're asked to take samples for various reasons. First of all, just economies of scale. I mean, it's easier to work with smaller amounts of data, especially if you have a massive database. We've got 425 transactions here, or records. What if we had 425,000? It's likely we don't want to work with all of that data at one time. We do data exploration with a smaller portion of the data, and we need to pick that randomly so it can be fair to what we're doing. Also, sometimes there are all kinds of regulations that we have to meet, standards that say, well, we want you to pick a certain number of records for auditing, for example. We want them picked randomly. So in order to meet those situations, we have to be able to understand how to select these records randomly from the database. After we get those records, we're going to do a little bit of data wrangling, in that we've got a number of variables in the records. We've got all of these variables, and we're going to take some of the variables that are, for example, the housing, where you can either own, rent, or other. I think other is probably like living in your parents' basement or something. And we want to convert those into a numerical value for the purposes of visualization and analysis. Some packages will allow you to look at things in a textual format, but others want you to put them into some sort of numerical format, and I'm going to do that here. So we'll create a code for housing and a code for jobs, and there are 4 categories in jobs. And we'll see how we do that. Obviously, you're going to have to take this text and convert it into something. The way we convert things in Excel is either through an if statement or through a visual lookup. Excuse me, a vertical or horizontal lookup. So a VLOOKUP would take that value in this cell, go over to a table and say, if I've got own, how do I convert that into a numerical value? And we'll see how we do that in just a second. Okay, so let's do the first part of this. Let's select 35 data records. I've already done it here. I'll just show you kind of what it looks like. You get some dialog boxes that says, what did you do? Well, you used a random seed of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a random number that's necessary for the purposes of randomizing your selection. And we specify it so we can trace it back. If we use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again as the seed, as a starting point, we can achieve the same path of randomness through the process. We desired 35 records. We got 35 records. Here's where the data exists. And you can see down here, here's my 35 records that I've selected: checking, savings, months, customer, housing, years, and job for these folks. Then I'm going to have to convert these things. So how do we do that? Well, let's go to Get Data. Worksheet says, draw a representative sample from an Excel worksheet. Sounds like what we want to do. We grab that, and then you'll see that this is the worksheet we're on. This is the workbook we're in. Here's the data range that's identified. I've already identified the data range once before, but if I didn't have it, what would I do? I'd simply click that little ... button there, and then I'd go grab the data and say, okay, this is the relevant data. I'd hit OK, and there's my data. It identifies the textual values in each of the columns, each of the fields as what we want. And here are the names of the variables. The way I get variables is, let me send these variables back. What I did there is I hit the first one, and then I hit a a shift, and that gets them all. I'll put them all back in where they belong. And the variables that we're interested in are checking. We're interested in savings. I want to hit control there, pick that. We're interested in months customer. Control there. I hit my control key, and then housing, years, and job. Hit this arrow and says, all right, move all this stuff over here to the variables in the sample data. And there they are. What else do we need to know? Well, we don't want 127 as a sample. We want 35 records as a sample. We don't want to sample with replacement. That sampling with a replacement, you put whatever you get back into the bucket, and then stir it up again and reach in again, and you might get that very same record again. You don't want to do that. So we just hit simple random sampling. We hit OK, and there it is. There's our data. The next step in the data is to do that wrangling where we take jobs and housing and turn it into some numerical value. I have done that in the solution. If you go to the solution, here is the data we just captured, and here are two ways of doing it, with a VLOOKUP and with an if. We'd only do it with one, obviously. You don't need it with both, but I did it with both just to show you how to do it, and you can see that the results are the same. So how do I convert housing into a numerical value? Well, it's a VLOOKUP, and the VLOOKUP says take this value of housing, which is a text value, own, go over to the table and look for it, and return it the second element in the table, which in the second column. Now remember, these tables have got to be constructed in ascending fashion. So the A would be here, B here, C here. In this case, other is the first element. T comes before W, so there's N, and then R comes after O, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R. So we have to arrange these things in that structured format. And same thing for the job code, ascending values from a alphabetic point of view. If we look at the logical ifs, we can see that this is not a bad if to write, simply because There are only 3 values. If you have 3 values, you can have 2 ifs, one nested inside the other. This one says take E20 and look at it. If it's equal to own, then assign a 1. Else, if that's not the case, ask another if question. If it's equal to rent, assign a 0. If it's not own, if it's not rent, it must be other. And so you don't need to specify that if. You simply put that as the last argument of your if statement and say, well, if nothing else works, you must be other, and that's a -1. And there you go. So, by the way, all of these text elements have got to be very, very clean. You can't spell it slightly differently. It would be a totally different search for a word if you spelled owns it versus own. Okay? So, what if we didn't have the capability that we have here with our software, which is quite nice because it does it for us, and we needed to do this on our own? What if this is all we had, this data here? How would we get, for some sort of compliance, some effort, 25 randomly selected records from this 425? Well, let me offer you a way I think of doing it. So I'm going to put a rand between 1 and 1,000 here. The reason I've chosen 1,000 is because I'm a little concerned that if I use a rand between 1 and 425, I'm going to get some repeats. The repeats are okay. I'll show you how to handle that. But 1 through 1,000, I'm less likely to get repeats. 1 through 10,000, I'm even less likely to get repeated records or values in this column. Let's pull this down. So everyone gets a rand between, and they're all different. And what I'm going to eventually do then is I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to take these values and I'm going to sort in ascending fashion, 1 to 1,000, and the first 35 I get will be the ones that I choose. Now, to do that, this is still an active function, the rand between. And anytime I recalculate the spreadsheet, that number is going to change. You can see it changing there. So I'm going to put something I call key over here to give it a title. And I'm going to come into this column with all of these random numbers. I'm going to copy them. Then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to paste special. I'm going to paste as a value. I paste as a value. 39 used to be there. Now look what happened. 39 that was here turned into 439. So they're here now. No matter what I do now, if I recalculate the formulas, that row changes, the original row, but the key doesn't change, and that's the one I want to keep because I want to do a sort. I want to do a sort of this thing. So how do I sort it? Well, you know how to sort. You grab the data, you go down to the bottom, you go to sort. I want a custom sort. I select key, smallest to largest, ascending fashion, and there we are. And notice we got some repeats. There's 2 2s, there's 2 4s. So we did get some repeated numbers here. There may be others in there, 41. So which of these records do I select? Well, I just simply number 1 through 35. And that's it. These are my 35 records, selected randomly. Why? Because the original selection was based on a rand between. They're organized with no systematic sort of organization. It's totally random. And here are my 35 records that I needed for the purposes of compliance with some sort of effort. All right. It shows you can really do anything with Excel that anybody else does it with an add-in. Why? Well, because you have to go to basic fundamental sort of capabilities of Excel, but if you're persistent and you're clever and you don't frustrate easily, you can get this stuff done without these packages. I'd rather use the package, but the packages are expensive. This frontline package will cost you thousands of dollars. All right, that's the end of this particular problem 10, problem 1 in Module 5.